Hello, everyone, and happy holidays. Merry Christmas for those of you who will be watching this episode after Christmas. We hope you had a wonderful and joyous Christmas holiday. For those catching me live today, what are you doing on Christmas Eve day? Watching me? No, I'm happy that you are, and thank you so very much. We know that there's a variety of holiday celebrations that go on during this time of year. We're only celebrating that of Christmas at this point, but we've already passed through Hanukkah. There is, of course, Festivus for the rest of us. I don't know if you already have your Chrome poll up, but there is an area of grievances that we've already passed. Hopefully you did that as well and did some wrestling for it. Also, there are many other episodes of different holidays at this time, as I mentioned, and we hope that you are enjoying each and every one of them. From a personal note, I know that given our current pandemic situation and seeing in the news the unfortunateness of so many flights being canceled, even though there's many people that are driving, those that rely upon flying, I hope you find a means to get to the purpose of your travel and get there as safely as possible. And wishing everyone that they have a very, very safe holiday, regardless of what you were doing to secure yourself. But I hope that nobody suffers from this holiday period. With that being said, our topic today is a sexy one for holidays. By the way, holidays, there it is. That's my holiday token right there. I was going to wear the hat. And thought, you know what? I look silly enough already. Hats only augment that. Our topic today is attribution modeling. What is it, and what can you do with it? Now, this was actually an inspiration. I had a whole different topic set for today, but I thought that this was a worthy one for today, given that this episode, unlike others, I mean, actually, there's three sets of episodes that usually get longer replay or larger replay than they do live attendance, and that is the episode just after Thanksgiving, for obvious reasons. The episode after Christmas, this one, and the episode around New Year's, because it's holiday time and it's a great chance for you not to worry about these types of things or be focused on. That being said, about 4 years ago, we've been doing this now in our 8th year, we had a massive amount of people that watched and listened and replayed our Christmas episode. Strangely enough, it was that, well, gee, let me go do something interesting or fun and play back these shows that I don't normally get the chance to, and or, I want to get away from family. Whatever it is, we had a lot of people that watched it for years ago first. So we hope that this episode about attribution is one of those. So this came from an inspiration from a presentation from Eric at Milestone. He did a presentation on attribution, and he did a wonderful job on the basics of attribution. Focused it primarily on Google's use of attribution or how they determine it. And he showed you how within Google, you can find your attribution information if you are set up correctly in tracking. Key element to that is that you've set up your trackability so you can tell Google through Google Analytics the source of the traffic, what its value is, and so forth. So Google can give you the information of your attribution. So it doesn't magically happen. You have to set it up so that it can tell you that data to give you this information we're about to talk about. But Eric did a great job in explaining the basic 6 functions in reality, because the 7th is a very expensive one, of attribution modeling. And we'll go through those. But strangely enough, if you go to Google this, you can get up to 14, 18. Everybody tries to have a twist or unique thing to this. Even I have a personal opinion and personal usage of data associated with attribution. That is a combination of several attribution strings that aren't really applicable or available in Google, which is what the major platform most people pull attribution modeling from. But there are reasons and madnesses for this, and we hope to get into this a little bit. Well, I was probably not going to have a full hour day, but who knows? You know how I can go off on trades and dialogues and tangents and everything else. We might just end up spending a whole hour talking about this happiness. Wait a minute, I'm supposed to turn this around because it has logo. Coffee, breakfast of champions. Anyway, so let's dive into it. No, I'm not going to put up screen PowerPoint presentations and share about this. This is all mental awareness, even though you have to stare at me talking about this or blissfully listening to this on your podcast or what have you. We're going to go through the different types of modeling. Let's first go through what Google offers. They have 7 types. And as I said, the 7th is expensive, and I'll get to that reason why. So let's first discuss what attribution modeling is. A few years back, more than I want to count at this particular point because it seems fresh in my mind, Google took away our keyword tracking. They did not want us to focus in on what words were being used in search in as much as what they were being used for. And they've done huge advancements in their algorithm, their mathematical calculations, to understand why words are being used by search terms with words before it, words after it. There's whole terminology and acronyms of the platform that does this. Let's just keep it round and fluffy and cotton candy. It tried to understand why you were using words. Like the word Victoria. We've used this as an example in a few of our other discussions. If I search Victoria, it depends on the words I put around it. Because if I try to rank for, back in the day before all this was actually happening, if I tried to rank for Victoria, I might be looking for Victoria Falls, Victoria, British Columbia, Victoria, the Queen of England, whatever. Didn't know Victoria was the word. Well, over time, Google got better at understanding based upon the words around it. If you put falls or water or Africa or things like this, then you're talking about Victoria Falls. If you're talking about royalty or hierarchy or airing or lineage or whatever, and Victoria might come into Victoria, Queen of England. If you're talking about Canada and coastlines and cities, and then you might be Victoria, British Columbia. See what I mean? Or the ship or anything else. So the context of what the word was being used was valuable. So that's why Google said, stop chasing words, because you can get misconstrued on the value of the traffic that those numbers represent. So they wiped them out of our analytics. No more word tracking for organic. They still showed you for paid because that's how they got paid. But from the organic perspective, they took that information away. What they gave us in return was a platform for attribution. Now, attribution is, in the simplest of form, who contributed to what I was asking to track. Okay, and I'm being ambiguous about the ask to track part for reasons we'll discuss. So in attribution, I want to say my website's about generating revenue, selling products. I want to know what was the most effective thing I did that sold product. So my purpose is the revenue that's being created, and I want to know who helped in that process. Well, it's a progression. Okay, now Google will give you your attribution string. If you track properly with goals and event tracking and so forth and proper UTM tracking, if you don't know those terms, learn them. Need to have those. Those are functional basic 101 SEO stuff and SEM stuff. It would say, come to my website from where? What referral came from that? And then you would use that by tracking. And from that, what program did I use? And it would show in attribution modeling this string. It would always show your most productive attribution string based on the dates you have selected. It would say, well, something organic happened, something paid happened, and something social happened, and then they bought. And that was your most productive one. And you could burrow into aspects that you did have more robust tracking on. I was like, what organically did they come to? What on my website or what have you? What did they go for paid? If it was tracking my paid ad, what ad campaign generated that? And socially, what post did I go over and have up there? What paid advertising maybe I had on there? And from that, you would be able to see, oh, so they went to this page for 20 events. They looked at my ad about my specials for the Tulip Festival. And then they looked at my social post about things to do at the Tulip Festival. So my Tulip Festival, for the dates that I picked it, is my biggest contributing attribution string. The way I just described it is a means of attribution that you looked at all three as contributors to the conversion. In fact, in Google, as Eric pointed out lovely in his presentation with Milestone, there are 6 available ones, a 7th if you want to spend a lot of money. So let's look at the list of things. Now, Eric made the example of commuting to the office, that if you left your house, drove your car to the train station, rode the train to the subway to the subway station, and walked to your office, that if that string actually happened, first touch attribution, which is the first model you could do, meaning the first thing that was contributing to that whole process, driving to the train station, means that the driving was the reward factor. The first place they went to out of that whole string of stuff, you're giving all the credit to them. The car. Well, in my case, it's like basketball. My example I like to use is basketball. The ball's put into play and it's handed to the guard. Okay, you just gave the guard the whole credit for the points that were just scored, regardless of how many times it changed hands down the court, who did what, who actually put the ball in the basket. The guard that touched it coming in bounds got all the credit for that. That's first touch attribution. And you say, why would somebody do that? We'll get to that. The second is just flipping it on the side or flipping it over. And that is last touch attribution, meaning the last thing that happened that went to the conversion of the revenue is the thing that gets all the credit. Now, this is the one that's most used by people. What was the place that actually gave us the revenue? So in that example of the attribution string that I made, where it was, okay, they went to my website, then they went to they saw a paid ad that they clicked through, and then they saw my social post, and then they bought or booked my hotel. So my social post gets all the credit for that because that was what converted. That's from there they bought. Well, that doesn't do fairness for the other stuff that was in the attribution string. It only gives credit to the last one. Yet this is the most often used one because this is the one most often understood by most people as, oh, well, this revenue, look at the ROI. We spent this much money on social media paid, and look at the revenue came from, because that directly made revenue. Meanwhile, in the other two, like the paid ad campaign in the example I gave, did not get benefit of that, saying, well, we spent that money, but we didn't get any revenue from it. The only revenue that they tracked based on that attribution was that they were the last one in the attribution string before the person bought. So they only get that revenue acknowledgement, that ROI. And we can tell by this attribution string, that's not a fair assessment of the contribution to that conversion, because they had a part to play in it that you gave social credit for. And in another attribution string where paid was the last click, last touch, they got the credit for something maybe social contributed before it. So neither first touch nor last touch seems to be a fair assessment of this. But they're used, mostly last touch, over all else, really. But there's reasons for this, and we're going to get to that. Okay, so the next is called last non-direct attribution. What this means is not the last click, but the next to the last click is given credit. So in our example of the three places of organic, paid, and paid social, paid got all the credit. And you say, well, what happened to social at the end and organic at the beginning? Okay, no, they didn't get credit. We're saying that the second to the last, so that we're not, in the view of this, giving the last place that the person went to before purchasing gets all the credit. We're saying the thing that drove them to that platform that then was the last one gets all the credit. Why would you use that? Well, stay tuned. The next is to say, hey guys, you know what? Let's just level the playing field for everybody. Everybody gets an equal share in credit for this. Where they went to paid, or organic, where they went to paid, whether they went to paid social, everybody gets a 33% of that. Everybody's an equal player. Everybody gets a portion of the revenue. So in other words, if it was $100 in sales, everybody gets $33 in value for ROI, contribution for what we paid on that channel. Well, okay, that seems a little fairer. But in all honesty, is it accurate? I mean, how influential was organic compared to social? Because obviously the organic inspired them, but they didn't purchase at that point. And paid may have driven them potentially close to the point of purchase because they answered things like specials or offers or whatever it is that they found in the paid ad campaign. And social was the coup de grace, the last event that pushed them over the top. Okay, so if you equally share it, sure, but maybe organic answered all their questions and it was for other reasons that they ended up touching the other two places before they purchased. Who knows? But linear attribution has its value proposition too. You think it's more equitable, even distribution of ROI. The next one is time decay attribution. Time decay says the farther away from the engagement in that attribution string, the less valuable it was. So in that three that I just gave of organic, paid social, over time, you gave less credit to the initial organic engagement and more to the social paid at the end because it was the most closest to the conversion. It had a higher value compared to the first one. In common sense terms, it's like, okay, they looked at organic, didn't do it for them. Looked at the paid ads, interesting, kind of kept them engaged, but didn't do it for them. Social paid made the value proposition. So where I was talking about that, even linear distribution, this actually affects and say, well, you know what, social seemed to be what put them over the hump. So let's give them more credit. Maybe 40, 30, 30 or 40, 50, 40 and 10, decay. Okay. All right. So now there's that one. Then there is what's called position-based attribution. This assumes that the two most important interactions are the first one and the last one. What got you interested and what got you to buy. Makes sense, right? That's why these things come up. Somebody says, this seems to make sense to me is the first one and the last one, okay? What got me interested and what finally got me to buy. Everything in the middle gets less because they contributed, but they weren't the crux of what the conversion value was, okay? They were there for a reason. They helped for what they could. They went to them because it was relevant to what they were interested in, what they basically found on the first touch. And then the last one was the push over the hump, okay? The last one is only coming with Google's 360 paid license, which is Boku $100,000 plus expensive per year. And this is called algorithmic or data-driven attribution. This one, you got to have the coins to use from Google. I could tell you how to do this in a certain way. I'm not trying to be as smart as an algorithm with Google. They're pretty smart. But I can tell you ways to modify how you look at the other resources of attribution to include aspects that the algorithmic data-driven contribution uses in its calculation. So what is it? Algorithmic data-driven contribution, attribution, blah, 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 it says, you know what? We know all of these things have influence on the path of conversion that you're tracking, the measure of what you're tracking. Sometimes based on factors, which we're going to discuss today, certain ones have higher value than others. It's not just because it was the first one they looked at, and it's not just because of the last one they looked at, and it's not just because over time, the one that converted them versus the one that started them, not the one that was just the first one only because it was the instigator, and not because it's the last one only because it was the converter, but because of what you're measuring over the time you're measuring it at the volume of what is the interactions, we can assign potential value to each step in the process based on the value of what it created to what it is you're measuring. Now you notice that my verbiage has changed to what it is you are measuring. Because in very simple terms, most people think revenue is the only thing you're measuring. And there are so much diversities to what you want to learn about when it comes to data and the analytics of data and the attribution value associated with your efforts. It isn't just about the dollar created. Sometimes the value is more about learning the path of discovery, getting the lead that you're looking for, disseminating the engagement that you're looking for, understanding the source of interest that you're looking for. And it also goes over the sense of time span that you're looking for. So let me quantify that. You have other factors associated with attribution that are not in the simplistic modeling, 6 models that Google gives you to use. Because if you remember correctly, when you look at your analytics, in the upper right corner is a date spread of what data you're looking at. And to put this in real terms, let's just put it into a real model consideration. Skip and pause attribution because I just threw 7 variations to attribution modeling at you. Yay, Christmas. Okay, is our process of what we use our data for. Thinking about our engagements, we deal with a lot of reasons why our websites operate. If you're looking for lead generation, it's not so much about the conversion of revenue from that as it is the dissemination of the leads you get and which sources created those leads. In our purchasing cycle, when somebody looks at hotel rooms 2 weeks from now, mentally from a marketer, I have 14 days, let's just say it's an even 7 days a week from where they looked to when they want to stay. I have 14 days to engage them, to convert them to saying, stay with us. Now, in marketing world, that's called frequency. A lot of people abuse this in retargeting. If you've ever touched some place website, all of a sudden they're freaking retargeting links, ads, everything, display is on everything you touch afterwards, repetitively, consistently, persistently, annoyingly. And they don't stop. They are relentless. And it has nothing to do with the dates you looked at. It's just they're thinking front of mind, front of mind, front of mind, front of mind, and they will abuse that retargeting capability until you are fed up with them and angry with them that you'll never buy from them because of that just annoying everywhere I go, your freaking ad is showing up. That's not good marketing. That's the old Kirby marketing, persistence overwhelms resistance, which, yeah, great. That works out well for the positive experience. So if I only know I have 2 weeks to engage with you, then I know I have a compressed frequency of opportunity. I have to gauge two things: how often I touch you in the sense of communicating information in the hopes that I can convert you, and on which channels may be the most productive. Now attribution has a very strong element of information that I need. What did you first look at? What other things did you look at that I had out there as well? What did you do while you're on them, like duration of views, how many clicks, things like that. And the amount of things you did on each of those platforms as to their value proposition of your process of discovery, education, and transaction, the typical 3-step model that we often talk about. Now, if you're looking at dates that are 90 days out, I don't have to compress as much frequency. What I have to do is figure out when are my best time stops to make sure that I'm in front of you when you're looking for certain things. It may not be me you're looking for, but if I'm related to what you're looking for, I want to make sure I show up. So if you looked at accommodations and I showed up and that triggered your connection with me, that's the first touch point in the attribution. But then you're looking at things like things to do in my destination, skiing in my destination, or car rentals in my destination. I want to make sure I'm also touching those places at the right time when you touch those places, so that I'm not intrusively repeating retargeting, but I am front of mind for when you come back to the topic of coming to my destination. Am I included in your thought process? And that only happens from knowing how much value of what places these people are looking for. So I do these things. To be honest with you, we talked about 6 offered by Google, 7th you pay for Google. If you were to actually Google attribution modeling, the average is between 10 and 14. It all depends on how much you want to start recreating and creating the ways you break things up. So in addition to the 6 I talked to you about, okay, you also have what's called a U-shaped, which is position-based attribution, a W-shaped attribution, and a full path Z-shaped attribution. Now, like I said, I'm not out to bore you into doldrums about all the mechanical variations of this. Mine is really to help you understand what you're looking for in attribution modeling, what you do when you're looking at attribution. And let me digress a little bit, me and tangents, about why this is important. As leaders, we often, because of the volume of things that you are being presented with, you require of your team to consolidate their general information into specific information. And from that specific information, present to you the best perspective that they have. So going to the old adage of computers, garbage in, garbage out, if what they construct as information is skewed or inaccurate to the purpose of constructing that information, they're giving you an incorrect perspective on data that you're going to use in a decision process. Now, your first solution to this is don't let them do that. Be a part of every step of the process. Not functional in anyone's lifetime to handle the volume of work and knowledge and lugging and ditch digging and daily, paint the wall, grow the grass kind of stuff. Can a leader function well? As a matter of fact, it's just the inverse. If you get caught into that kind of ditch digging, you literally can't focus on all the things that you're responsible for. You can only focus on the one thing you're doing. So it is more to your best interest to sample, okay? Trust, but with verification, validate through your exercise, that you sample out on occasion, not the data specific to what you're sampling, okay? Going in and saying, why do you have this data the way you have it? Where did it come from? And how are you calculating it? That's a byproduct. The real product is verification of the process of how the data is accumulated, the logic associated with creating these strings of attribution to not only know how it's done, but to know how it's being done for what is being asked of it, so that you can trust the data from your team that hands you that to make the leadership decisions that you're required to make. So when it comes to attribution, a lot of people, it's funny. I'll date myself in saying, as soon as somebody writes a tome of their life, it's a 500-page masterpiece of their literary work. The first thing that's asked of most people is, what's the cliff notes of it? What's the executive summary? You're constantly inundated with how can you abbreviate all the depth of what is written into a straightforward, these are the highlights kind of point. And I've even seen executive summaries of executive summaries, where it's gotten so acid bath that it literally is not in its way accurate to the total content that was available. It's almost like if you generalize too much, you lose the clarity of what the data is that you generalize. You can get too high of an altitude and the world turns into a blue marble. You've lost track of all the intricacies of the variations of what the world is like. So with that, you can get too far away from the data, is my point. When it comes to attribution modeling, the key element is the purpose of how the data is created. This goes back to the modifications that I was talking about that lends itself, similar to the Google algorithmic calculation, that there are more modifiers than the modifiers that they make available in attribution strings. And again, all credit to Eric within Milestone when he explained the simplistic 101 version of what attribution modeling does, in the sense that it does this: first click, last click, linear. These are all functional aspects of it. But the things that you have to include in those processes are variables that are not easily accessible to it, because you have to understand why you would make these modifications before making those modifications. And that is the time that you're looking for, which is completely related to why you're looking for the data you're looking for. The value that you're looking for, which is so easily assumed to be what money did we make from it, but it isn't. It can be, as I mentioned before, things like lead generation, source of engagement. It could be dissemination of channel contribution. It could be lots of things. And the volume that you're measuring, how much of what you're doing is related to what you're measuring. Like, are you measuring total traffic, only traffic from a particular resource, the resource that you're looking at, the referral content that you're looking for in relationship to another, a causation relationship between, say, email and paid campaigns, or organic versus social, whatever that is. There's reasons for looking at these comparisons, and those are the volumes, value, time, and what exactly are you looking for in the sense of events, engagements, duration of time, frequency. So it really begins to get very different in your purpose of tracking the attribution that you're looking for, which means it opens up to all the variations of the types of attribution that you can look for. Take, for instance, we did that linear attribution, and Google offers it that it's an even distribution over time of all the touches that were involved in that attribution string. From step 1 to step 10, all of them shared an equal ROI value for the revenue that it generated. Let's just keep it simple to the original examples that we had. But in a true linear attribution, you create a time decay, that says, first touch until it gets touched again. Because remember, there's a lot of frequencies of this. You can have the same resource in the same attribution string. It isn't an either or. It can be an and, an and, an and, an and, or, and an and, or, and an and, an and. It could be your organic content gets used multiple times in the string. So now you get into the corner, well, it was the first one, but it's also the 12th one, and it was done 4 times. How much do I get for each one? Well, in a linear attribution, you just say it's all even. Well, it seems like it's a lot more important if it got touched 5 times and everything else got touched once. It seems like that seemed to be a pretty big contributor. And you can say, well, 5 times out of the 10 that's in there, you're adding those numbers into it to say you're giving 5 times the value to the 1 time that it touched each time. That's just averaging again. Again, it rounds numbers. If you did a time decay in with that, you run the fact that the first one starts at a value, and it diminishes until it's touched again, diminishes until it's touched again, diminishes until it's touched again, so that the first one may be only worth 2%, the second and the 5th touch might be worth 4% each, and the 7th one is worth 10% because it was close to the last. Okay, well, it doesn't give the same total volume of value as averaging it out, but it does give a skewed value that because of its frequency, it did get inherently more value. Here's the problem with that logic. From a revenue perspective, that's not completely accurate as to the value of the first touch. The reason why first touch is being used by people is because that's the catalyst. That was the nascent, that was the genesis of their engagement with you. So that means that the value of what you put on that platform was the spark that created the path that ended in the conversion. That has a pretty good value because that caught their eye. Is it because of their usage of that platform? Is it because of the creativity you put into it? Was it an image that you used? Was it an offer you created? What type of platform was it? A lot of that has to do with what it was. And to simply dismiss it saying, well, it was the first thing, so it's the least important thing in the time decay because over time it got lesser and lesser value is not a fair assessment of that. So wouldn't something like a time decay frequency modifier combination go together that says every time that same platform gets retouched, it gets restarted to a full value again? So say it was the first touch. Over time, it diminishes in its percentage contribution to the attribution. But when it gets touched again, it gets put right back up to the same level of value. Plus, it gets amplified because its frequency has increased. So not only did it get reset to its original value, it got amplified for its frequency. And every time it gets used again, it gets reset and amplified, reset and amplified. Then at the end of the attribution string, you're sitting going, wow, that really was not only the beginning nascent of the attribution string, it was the strongest percentage contributor based on its frequency over time compared to all the other touch points in the attribution string. Now I have a value proposition of when I want to solicit for what it is I'm tracking. Again, now, if you're just looking at general traffic to your website, you're including everybody in a big hodgepodge, a big whole bucket. You're not discerning the differences between people geographically, rate or price that they're paying, duration of their stay, the channel that they used. What was the source of that channel's engagement? Was it organic? Yes, but maybe it came from an email campaign. Are you properly assessing your CRM and investment strategies? And sometimes attribution is really making sure that by proper tracking, your email offers entered into a progression of attribution that solicited an additional conversion. They themselves may not have been ever touched again. They didn't go back to the email again to hit that link. Once they went to the link you offered in the email, that created the catalyst going forward. So here, the email got used once and never again. In a time decay, that would get lost to nothing. But it really was the beginning. And it was because of CRM, which means we already have a relationship with them. We should go back to this. If it's a frequency thing, it also loses because it never got used again. So there's no perfect attribution string is what I'm saying. There's no one that solves it all for all reasons. What you have to understand is that attribution strings are relevant to the content of what you're measuring. Again, to my variables of event, time, value, and volume. Those are the four variables that determine what type of attribution you're to look at to determine what value of the information is providing. I've often said that when you go to make a quiz or a survey or anything, ask yourself first, what would I do with the answer? Of course, you can ask, what kind of answer do I want? What information do I want by asking this question? But you really have to go one step farther and say, what would I do with the answer? What would I do with this information? And from that, you build your questions to lead to that conclusion. Not that you know what the answer is, but what you would do with what's being told to you. Same too with attribution. What would you do with what's being told to you? And that's why you decide on certain attribution strings. There's things like U-shape attribution. Why U-shape attribution? Because if you're looking at, say for instance, lead contribution, then your first touch and your lead creation, meaning the step that it goes into the progression of conversions, okay, is equally valued. It's your first and second step, basically. And it's not really your second step, but it's your first to the next transition attribution. They're equally weighted, and the variance between the two of those, anything that happened between those 2 points, are equally distributed in a percentage value of half of what the other two are. It doesn't even come close to your close and transition. It really is about what did we disseminate to what channels and to what end did that create the next engagement. Once that's done, we're done tracking. its value proposition afterwards, the revenue and or sales and or affiliate distribution that it creates, is not important. See, this is a lead generation affiliate relationship model. It says what we distribute goes to where and how much of that actually had value based on this metric. There's a W-shaped attribution string that says from first touch to lead creation to what's called opportunity creation, which is okay, from the leads that were generated, what generated value did they represent? That's equally distributed to the final value of what the closing or the conversion was for. Then you have what's called full path, that at each touch point has a certain even value, but the interms between the major key touch points have a diluted value. I know I'm talking as I look at a diagram and you're not looking at it, but I will be having links in the live show notes that have links to places that describe this in much more detail. And like I said, that's 10 different attribution models compared to the 6 that are offered by Google, 7th if you have the 360 program with them. So there are variations to this. The key element to this is, again, going to the idea that you must, trust through verification. Know the process that the data is being given to you. Do not simplify it with a checkbox that says, oh, we do attribution modeling, and it's averaged out or it's last click attribution, and you're assigning it only for the purpose of ROI, and you're looking at a microcosm of a default data set that is, this date back to this date of last month, so a 30-day cycle. Is that a legitimate time frame that you're looking at? Is it a particular, always adjust your dates to what you're applicably looking for information. Is it from a campaign spread? Is it from a chronological month? Is it from a campaign transition to a campaign transition? Is it from an email campaign? A lot of it has to do with what you're looking for when it comes to, say, event. Like, say, for instance, the email campaign. That's an event. So from the event of the email drop, and attribution-wise, what did the email do? Not from a time decay or frequency decay, okay, but from, say, for instance, a U-shape. When it did what it did to the point that it distributed to the channels that created revenue, what did we generate from that? From an affiliate relationship, distribution relationship? How much did it go to where and for what reason? Now you're getting useful data, because that means that when the same scenario potential comes up in the future, you can go back on data and say, okay, when we did a similar email at a similar time of year with an offer like this, it went from here, did this, distributed to this, and made the impact of these. That's useful data. That's the data that turns out very helpful to people when it comes to why you're even doing attribution modeling and meaning. Not just do it as a checkbox, say, oh yeah, we do crazy stuff like that. We're smart people. We know what's going on. Doesn't help if you don't know what to do with the data. So, fortunately, I feel pretty good. We didn't run the whole hour with attribution modeling, but we certainly did and cover most of the bases with this. Like I said, there are variations on top of variations. And if you are thinking, gee, Loren, which ones do you like? Again, there is no perfect model, but the model that I like in relationship to ROI, cash generation ROI, that you're looking at the conclusion of revenue generated from campaigns, based on the idea that I pick time sensitive to why I'm interested in it, like a month or a campaign to campaign bookmark or an event driven purpose to it. I like a frequency time decay W model. It's a hybrid of 3 models that doesn't exist. I actually have to create it over in Excel most of the time. You guys knows we all go back to Excel, where I take the data and then provide average mean value weighted or percentage value based on each step of it. I take the data based on engagements that I track. And from that, I don't use Google's attribution model. I mean, it's fun to go look at. It's quick and easy. It's easy, so forth and so on. And I highly recommend you watch Eric's presentation from Milestone. I'm sure there's a replay somewhere. It was a 30-minute presentation that he just did, I think, yesterday. That was really nice. Great introduction about attribution modeling as to how it does it. But I take that information and say, okay, I will reset the value from each time the touch point is reused. And I will time decay it from the last time it was used so that it doesn't have a skewed weight value if it never got used again. By the same token, there's 2 thresholds of value that I have for that. From where did it come? From what did it disseminate to? And from the dissemination, what did it create? So I track all the sources of where the dissemination went to, whether it was through paid campaigns, paid social campaigns, organic campaigns, organic social. I track the references of all those from the usage of what I initially tracked with UTM or offer parameter. One of my easiest ways of doing that is creating unique promotions by name and or promotional code that are only used on certain channels, so I can follow the path of that usage regardless of whether it was initially created for that channel or not. If I send it through an email, that email resets its value to an identity that came from the email. So even if it's found on a paid ad campaign because it's dynamically pulled in for dynamic content based on criteria for the paid ad campaign, it still came from the source that it was offered via the fact it was offered from the email, via it was put into a paid ad campaign as a retargeting model for this person that found it initially on the email or shared it with somebody. So I know that may sound overtly confusing, and a lot of this can be, but the value of knowing where the source of these things were and how much each thing touched in between it and the time that they bought something, if you're just tracking revenue, and also the value that each one of those represents and how often they were used, is invaluable data that truly is what Google wanted us to get to when they took away the keyword tracking, is to understand how the process, the funnel, for lack of a better visualization, is in the process of when they first discovered you, to when they became educated about you, to when they transitioned or Z-modded with you, zero moment of transaction with you. So there you have it, marketing attribution in 40 minutes. Eric, you beat me. You did the basic model in 30 minutes, and I tried to go advanced in 40. So I guess the advanced model will be 50 minutes. Anywho, which way? As a reminder to everyone, this is the day of Christmas Eve, and I sincerely appreciate everyone that has watched and is watching us live for the show, and for those, again, who watch us on recording or playback. Thank you so very much. For those that don't know, we are on our own TV channel. You can find it on Roku, Android TV, Apple TV, and Amazon Prime TV. Just look for Hospitality Channel. Our live show, this one, is always on the free side of that. Think of it as Netflix. It's a paid subscription service. We went through OTT TV last week. So we're on that kind of profile, which means that if you pay $4.99 per month, we have additional paid for content, much like Netflix, where you can go look and categorically look and play whatever you want to out of the categories of conversation and content that we have there. Not just the show. We're adding more and more content for food and beverage, for hotel operations, for accounting, for HR, for lots of things. The spirit of the channel is truly dedicated to all things hospitality. It's not trying to be a food channel or a home improvement channel or anything. It's or a travel channel. It's really meant for people in the industry wanting to know more and learn more about the industry and be better at what they do. And that's the purpose of the channel. Also, too, we are an app. You can find us on Apple iOS and also Android iOS under Hospitality Channel. And if you would like to see a linear replay version of all of our shows, you can go to hospitalitychannel.tv. There you'll see replays of this and all of our shows for the past 8 years. They're all in there in repeated enough cycle. Plus also our podcasts that we do. There's a video context version of our podcast that we replay. 5 podcasts. We have the Hospitality Marketing Podcast, which I do just after this live show, plus it has a little recap of today's show. Also, too, we have Reputation Management. We also have Revenue Management. We also have MetaSearch, and we have Sales. All these podcasts are all dedicated to hospitality. We welcome you to watch and look for them. Just look for Hospitality Marketing, the podcast, and you'll see the latest edition with a recap of this show. So to everyone, thank you so very much, as always, for the privilege of your time watching us, listening, sharing the year with us. We're just 1 week away from being 2022, which in my mind is amazing that we are already in 2022. We hope that 2022 is a better year than 2021 in some ways. And for those who had a good year in 2021, we hope you have a better one in 2022. Always an improvement to our lives. So thank you all for your patronage in listening to our show, watching our show, listening, and everything else. We will catch you next week, New Year's, or New Year's Eve day, I should say, where we never miss a show. We have been doing this now and we're in our 8th year, and we do it every week. We're in 39 countries. We're translating in 11 languages, and we hope you enjoy the content that we share each week. So with that, the merriest of Christmases to everyone, and thank you all for your time, and we look forward to you talking to you next week. Bye, all.